Hey guys, Technomentor here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing the iPhone XS Max or the XS Max with the iPhone 6s Plus. In this comparison video, we're going to take a look at the hardware, the software, the overall performance of both of these phones on iOS 14 in 2021, whether you're deciding between either of the devices or looking to upgrade from one to another. In this video, we're going to break everything down so you guys know everything you need to know between these two devices. But before we go ahead and get started with today's review video, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market for a newer phone at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section. So let's go ahead and dive into today's video. First thing first is the release date of both of these phones. These phones were released about 3 years apart. The iPhone 6s Plus here, as you can see, came out in September of 2015 around Apple's annual release date. And 3 years later, in 2018, Apple released the iPhone XS Max. In this video, we're going to call the Max and the Plus. What happened with iPhone XS Max is that Apple renamed its Plus size, or the bigger size phone. What used to be known as the 6 Plus, 7 Plus, 8 Plus became the Maxes on the iPhone XS Max, 11 Pro Max, and 12 Pro, 11 and 12 Pro Max. So Apple kind of renamed that. So that's one thing you want to know. And about these two phones, we'll go ahead and start taking a look at back of these phones. That's where you can probably start seeing the differences, because a lot has changed within 3 years between these devices. Of course, the first thing you notice between these two devices is the build of it. The iPhone Max here has both front and back all glass versus the 6s Plus here. As you can see, it's aluminum body here, and it has that more shinier bezel all to it in the Apple logo here. But of course, the other thing you notice is the 6s, which distinguishes from the 6 Plus. So the 6s Plus is actually a different model. A lot of people, there's a confusion around these two devices. And then if we talk about the storage device on these two phones, a lot has changed as well, and that's where the price point kind of factors in as well. The iPhone 6s Plus at the base 16 gig model, you paid around $749 when it was released in 2015, whereas the Max here in 2018, you paid $1099 for the 64 gig model. So of course the storage has increased almost 4 times, but the price you pay, almost starting price comparison of the original price, you're paying almost 400 and a half more than you would on these devices. And if we look at the comparison of the back of these two phones, you'll notice, of course, we'll talk a little bit more in the camera section, but the dual 12 megapixel camera on the Max versus just that single one on the Plus here. And of course, the other things to notice is, of course, you have the logo here. There's that writing that's not gone completely from the iPhone Max here. And if we take a look at the body overall, you'll notice the one noticeable difference is the last lineup that Apple had the 3.5 millimeter jack when they moved away to using the Thunder port for both charging and your headphone jack as well, which a lot of people kind of didn't like, because the fact that you need an additional dongle if you're looking to charge your phone and use your headphones at the same time. So that was kind of an annoyance, but Apple has done with it, and it's no longer any of the models. Besides that, you'll notice that the Max here has a more shinier bezel here compared to just that solid silver bezel here on the phone. And that's all around. The build is pretty unique in terms of how Apple has done away with the aluminum body to all glass here. And you'll notice the same thing around here. Again, by the jack port, speaker on the XS Max, there's a lot more going on, where there's only a couple on this side here. So more, of course, speaker means more stereo grade that has better speaker for your Max version. And to talk about the other aspect of these two phones that we really need to discuss is the build and of both of these phones. As you can see here, Of course, a big difference between these two phones is its body size in terms of the screen resolution. The iPhone Max here has almost, it was very similar in terms of their height and weight. A lot of things. The Max does weigh a little bit more, a little over a 7.3 ounce compared to the 6S Plus here, which weighs just a little over 6 ounce, so a little bit heavier between these two devices that you notice right off the bat. Of course, that's because of the build, having that glass back and such makes it much more heavier than the other phone. And we want to talk about the display between it. As we mentioned, the display, although the body are very similar in size, but the display real estate that you get on the Max is around 6.5 diagonal all-screen OLED display compared to the Plus here, which is a 5.5 widescreen LCD display with IPS technology. And with that OLED display, you get a lot of differences. For example, the resolution on the Max is 2668 by 1242 pixel at 458 compared to 1920 by 1080 at 401 on the Plus here. So that's a big difference. The other difference that you might not notice right away between it is the contrast ratio. Thanks to that OLED, you get almost 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio, where on the 6S Plus you get 1,300 to 1 contrast ratio. Things like True Tone is not available on the iPhone Plus here. So True Tone is a unique feature on starting with the iPhone 8 and above. You'll notice in the display center is this feature that is True Tone that allows the phone to automatically adjust the lighting of the display based on the ambient surrounding conditions and such, which is not available unfortunately on the iPhone 6S Plus here that we have. As you see, it's not there. So that's a very noticeable difference you'll notice between these two devices in their display aspect. And let's talk about the hardware in terms of what you can expect in this chip between these two phones. So the iPhone Plus here has the A9 versus the Max, which has your A12 Bionic chip, and that's a big improvement because of 3 years, 3 generation of chip differences between it. Something you notice along with that, the A12 Bionic chip, there's also this second generation of neural engine which is not found on the Plus here. This helps it if you're doing a lot of multitasking, heavy graphic gaming, and just using your phone constantly to render. A lot more going on and being able to just do anything on the fly. Of course, both of the phones are pretty much running iOS 14, which we'll talk a little bit more between this device. And then the last aspect of hardware we want to talk about is the build that we talk about is the water resistivity. Unfortunately, on the 6S Plus, the phone is not water resistant at all. So if there's water that gets in it, or if you take it for a dive, it will become water damage and effectively defective. On the Plus here, though, you have an IP68 rating that you're able to take the phone for almost 2 meters at 30 minutes. So, but the one thing you do want to keep in mind is that any phone that you take for display, for example, this one that you have, because it's all body glass, if a glass on the back or anywhere is chipped or the front screen, it can easily compromise that. So does it really make a difference between being waterproof or not? Honestly, it depends on how you secure your phone, and if you keep the 6S in a waterproof case, you might be able to take it for a dive similar to the Max, but probably not recommended. And let's talk about the next other feature we talked about is sort of Face ID versus the Touch ID that's available on the iPhone 6 Plus, which used to be the older version way to unlock your phone. As you know, as Face ID was introduced here in 2021, it could be a good thing or bad thing depending on how you look at it, because you don't have that fingerprint anymore. If you have some kind of covering on your face and such, Face ID pretty much becomes useless. You're gonna have to enter your password each time, where the fingerprint here saw of that problem, and Apple was rumored to possibly bring back a on-screen fingerprint touch later uh, in the next release of iPhone 13 or even the iPhone 14. We'll see. Might have both options, which could really help the phone. And let's go talk about the other aspect. We want to talk about battery. It's really important to talk about the battery of these two phones because these two phones have some of the bigger size battery on the iPhone. The iPhone Max here has almost a 3200 mAh battery compared, and the iPhone 6s Plus here has around 2750 mAh battery. So big, huge battery. But what does that mean really in terms of for a regular user? Well, to tell you this, if you're using the iPhone Max or the iPhone 6s, if you're a light to medium user, most likely both of the phones will get you throughout the whole day without really any issue at all. That's a light to medium user. If you're a little bit more heavier, constantly using your phone, you probably will get maybe 3/4 of the day before you need a charge on a full charge. And the other one thing we want to talk about is video playback. That's important when you're comparing battery health of these two phones and the capacity of the battery you get out of it. Well, the thing you want to remember is that the iPhone Max here gives you 15 hours versus the 6s Plus, which gives you 14 hours. So 15 versus 14, although almost 500 mAh bigger because of that OLED, it consumes a lot more power on the iPhone Max here that we have compared to the LCD display, and that's why you don't really see a huge difference when you compare video playback. It's only 1 hour difference, thanks kind of the reason why OLED, it gives you that crystal clear or display. It takes a toll on the battery, and hence why the Max version needs a bigger battery to supply that power. And let's talk about the other thing we want to talk about is the camera quality between these two phones. As we saw, a difference between these two cameras is that you have dual versus a single 12 megapixel camera, and that makes a lot of difference in terms of what you can expect out of it. First, let's talk about the Plus here that we have. What kind of camera capacity does the Plus have? So if we look at the camera here on the iPhone 6s Plus, you notice that it doesn't have some of the cool features like the iPhone Max here. For example, in the photo, both of them does take photo, pretty good quality photo, we would say, but it's missing on the Plus is the portrait mode, which allows you to really get that studio grade photography. It makes you feel like you're almost a photographer in some ways, but that's not available on the Plus here. The other thing we want to talk about is the actual video recording capability between these two phones. So the iPhone Max here almost has the same capacity as some of the newer phones that Apple released, the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the 12 Pro Max. It's able to record at 4K 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, the iPhone 6s Plus does record in 4K but goes only at 30 frames per second. One of the limitations of these two phones is the camera. Of course, two is better than one, like we mentioned here, but a lot more comes out of the camera area that you'll be expecting if you're getting the iPhone Max over the 6 is, besides that, you also get extended dynamic range video as 30 frames per second on the Max. That's not possible on the 6s Plus. You also get 2 times the optical zoom. As you can see here, we're able to go 1 time and then even get into more depth by that 2 times is the zoom that you get out of it. And talking about camera, let's talk a little bit about the front-facing camera. Can you expect between these two phones? Well, the front-facing camera, you're gonna expect a couple of things. Both of the phones does have front-facing camera. The Max here has a 7 megapixel versus the 6s, which has a 5 megapixel, almost 2 megapixel higher on the Max. And does that really make a difference? Well, in terms of FaceTiming, you might notice that the quality between these two phones are slightly different in that area. Of course, that's one thing that you notice between it. A couple other things that aren't on the iPhone 6s Plus that's available because of the camera on the Max is that you have portrait mode that's possible on the front-facing camera. So if you go front-facing camera, you'll notice that you get portrait mode, which of course portrait mode is not even possible on it. Other thing you'll notice on the camera that's not available on the 6S Plus compared to the Max is you have that cinematic video stabilization at 1080 and 720 pixel. So those are really some of the technical aspect of it. And let's finally talk about between these two phones is the software. Software really is what makes up the phone between these two phones. Of course, both of these phones, right, can simply do calling, texting, no doubt about it. Simply just phenomenal for that. The quality of calling and texting, unlike Android, pretty much, something we see just phenomenal. And browsing wise, you'll notice when you start to browse is that the Max does beat the Plus, because of improved hardware, when you're browsing, you'll notice that right off the bat, there's no doubt that because of bigger hardware of the chip, the Max, of course, beats a lot of that. Both of these phones are actually running iOS 14. If you haven't noticed, we updated to iOS 14. And one thing we're going to say about iOS 14 is it might be the last major update the 6S Plus gets. That's because the 6S Plus has been around for over 5.5 years, and that's usually the time frame Apple stops the updates. So unfortunately, iOS 15 probably won't be supported on the 6S Plus. So it's the end of life for the iPhone 6S, where the Max here, we expect it to get at least another 2 to 3 years of software updates, and a lot's going to happen, of course, with the software update. And what the software update really means is that because the software updates will stop, you're going to be expecting major apps to be supported, but things are not going to start working anymore like it would when iOS 15 comes out towards the end of 2015. We'll probably make a review video in that probably won't be supported, and that's when you start seeing sort of lag and the sluggishness that comes with it. And that's something we'll notice. Between these two phones, they still do a phenomenal job because they they have both of the same sort of app build and such. You're able to do pretty much anything from using social media, from watching video. Of course, we'll say the video, of course, on the OLED display is phenomenal compared to the LCD. It's still good, but it's nothing compared to the iPhone Max here. So between these two phones, which one would you choose? If you're looking for a phone without sort of the budget that you can afford a little bit extra, go with the Max here because you're going to get a couple more years out of this phone. It's running iOS 14. It has pretty much a lot of the similar specs compared to the 12 Pro Max, which is the latest for the iPhones, and things like that. You're going to see on the Max is that it's going to be supported for a couple more years, and you just get that futuristic all OLED display. It's much bigger and the improved camera. Of course, if you're really tight on budget, the iPhone 6S Plus here actually is a budget-friendly phone for you because you can get it for almost a fraction of the cost what you would pay for the Max here. You probably get this phone for under $150 or so, or even less, depending on where you guys look at. That's why we'll link you guys in the description section with the discounted link for both of these phones. So hopefully this video was helpful. We also want to hear from you guys. If you guys are either of these phones or upgraded from one to another, what has your experience like? Leave a comment in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.